Hello. The art of 40k and Warhammer has changed and evolved many times over the years, but there are some artists whose work has come to define certain eras, editions, or factions. My guest today has done all of those. A prolific and inspiring creator whose work has consistently captured the brutal brilliance and beauty of the worlds of Games Workshop. Whether it has been black and white line drawings from the early supplements, beautifully rendered colour figures for covers, dynamic unit box art, or any of the simply countless immersive creations from 40k, Warhammer, Necromunda, and more, it is hard to name many artists as influential in defining the look of the games made by Games Workshop. And in the years since, companies like CMON have come to fully embrace and build from this incredible style as well, with entire game ranges like Rising Sun and Chronicles of Hate crafted based solely on this vision. I'm Jordan, this is Jordan Sorcery, and today I'm in conversation with Adrian Smith. Adrian, thank you so much for joining me. Really appreciate you being here. I wondered if we might start just by talking a little bit about where your journey began with fantasy and sci-fi art. What sort of got you started?
Inspiration, I mean, what flicked the switch?
Yeah, but yeah. How did you begin drawing, and sort of what led you to start illustrating in the first place?
Drawing. I had an uncle who used to draw, and when I used to go around babysitting the kids or whatever, or staying with the kids, he'd have drawings in his drawers. I'd go and snoop and look at it. Oh, that's really clever. But the most influential thing about his flat was the big fat book of Hieronymus Bosch he had, which that was my babysitting book. I'd be listening on big fat headphones to his music and looking at Hieronymus Bosch. But I wasn't really familiar with the fantasy market, so to speak, at all. I wasn't really into it. I was into toy soldiers and things, airfix soldiers. I mean, I had literally carrybacks of them. I was obsessed. Always been obsessed with soldiers and tanks and things. I've still got them. But the fantasy side, I wasn't so sure. The real trigger for the fantasy side was a family holiday we had in Kent. We rented a cottage, and there was some. I never read books either. There were books on the shelves. I was a very lazy child. Books on the shelves, and one of them said, "The Hobbit." That bloody hell was a Hobbit. So I took the thing off, and it was must have been one of the first editions because it had Tolkien's drawing of Smaug on the front. It was really battered anyway. Started reading it, and that was it. That was my holiday. Everyone was out every day. I was at home reading the Hobbit. And it was a complete eye-opener because I'd never really experienced fantasy before that. I mean, we had stuff on telly at the time, which I could quite a few names, but you won't know what I'm talking about. That was a real eye-opener. After that, I think I read the Silmarillion after that, and then Lord of the Rings. And I was just totally sucked into it. And then I started saving up for a art book I saw. The Tolkien Bestiary, and that's where I first came across John Blanche's work, and I didn't know who John Blanche was. I didn't know about Games Workshop really. I remember seeing the figures in Waterstones. That's where they used to sell them at a bookshop called Waterstones. This was before there were any Games Workshop shops outside of wherever it was, not in London. And I just lost my track there completely. But yes, yeah. You might what?
So the Tolkien bestiary and
so, but the switch, yes. It's very early for me, ladies and gentlemen. Like I was saying to Jordan, I don't normally get up for another few hours, but enough excuses. Yeah, that was the real trigger. After that, it was like I couldn't get enough. I got through Tolkien, and then got myself hooked onto Michael Moorcock, the Eternal Champion, all that stuff. Oh. Love it. Where did that? I mean, why isn't that a series on Netflix? Why isn't that making it millions of pounds? I don't understand. But yeah, that was the main trick. And then I started sort of drawing my own thing and saving up for the miniatures from Waterstones and getting into Citadel. Obviously, Citadel was the next big catalyst for everything. It was like, look at these. These are amazing. And plus, at the time, they sold them loosely in their little racks. There was no packaging or anything, so you buy the figure. What's the first figure I bought? It might have been the Hobgoblin Raiding Party. Don't ask me any more details. That's all I remember. But they were great. And you could buy them individually, like 20p each at the time, which seems like nothing, but it was a lot of money for a kid at that time. Yeah.
So did you actually like paint the miniatures? Did you illustrate them, draw them, and sort of, were you sort of...
As soon as I could afford to save up for the paints, I started painting them.
Yeah.
I saved up for the first ever Warhammer battle box, all the plastic dwarves, the axe. Was it goblins and dwarves? I can't remember.
There was a Warhammer. There was a regiment box that had like one of each different.
That's right.
Race, like a dark elf and a Skaven and all sorts.
Yeah, I think they were my first paint jobs, or maybe not my first, but for a long time I didn't want to paint them because they were just so beautiful. I sculpted little statues. That's how I treated them until I realised that you could play a game with them, and then I saw what other people were doing in the books, and then I started painting them. Yeah, but that and Ralpath and stuff at the time. Yeah. And the elves. Who did the elves? Myers elves. Tom Myers elves, was that?
Yes, sure, yeah. Yeah, that's right.
What happened to all those figures? I wish I still had them because there's a fortune there. But anyway, they're all gone. But yeah, I was totally hooked. Yeah.
So did your sort of artistic work and that sort of early drawing stuff that you were doing, was that then inspired by The Hobbit and by the Citadel miniatures that you were playing with, or were you still sort of exploring art separately to that kind of fantasy stuff?
Before Games Workshop?
Yeah.
Before Games Workshop, as I say, I was pretty lazy. I draw all the time, but there were never anything like keep. It was just drawing for the sake of drawing. And it was usually soldiers and things like that I draw uniforms. I was quite into uniforms and stuff. It's probably why I'm a concept artist now, because it was always... I actually wanted to join the army until I was a young teenager and realised that you had to do all that running around and swimming and stuff and being rough with other blokes. That totally put me off. But I still like the uniforms. Yeah.
Sure. And then you did start working with Games Workshop, but you were doing freelance stuff, is that right?
Freelance work first. My first ever job, I left school when I was just before I was 16. I got my first job at 16 as a clerical assistant in the pensions office. That didn't last long. I think I wasn't sacked, but I was sort of shown the door. And then I tried to get into art college, was turned away from art college, but they didn't just turn me away, they shoved me onto a graphics course, which was a complete dead end for me. But they were just filling the space basically and using me. I had no money for travel or anything, so it was pretty desperate times, and I was completely disillusioned by it all. I thought, I'm not good enough. They put me onto designing yogurt cartons and stuff like that. So that time was spent just, learning how to be a human being, really, going around with people, partying. That's what that time was. So I did learn stuff. I learned important human stuff. But as far as an artist goes, no, I didn't learn. So I'm pretty much self-taught. So I left after that. I got a job on like a few jobs, like a timber yard and stuff like that, just to pay the rent and stop my dad moaning. And then that got too much for me. And so I thought, right, what do these guys do? Because, like I say, at the time I was buying figures and looking at art books and stuff, and thinking, and it wasn't until later that I realised, hang on, this is not book. This artist is getting paid for doing this. He's earning. It's a job. My God, it's a job. I thought, right, okay, what do I do? At the time, there was no computers, there was, but not for me, social media or anything like that. So I was going to the library each day and trying to build a portfolio, because I didn't have a portfolio. And I was specifically targeting, because I had no idea how any of it worked. I didn't realize you needed an agent and all that. I was targeting publishers. And then one of those publishers was Games Workshop, and that was right at the end. I don't know why that was at the end of my list, but it was. And yeah, they wanted to see some work. So I got a portfolio together, which was me spending a few days literally looking at Gustave Doré's art book and using his for anatomy and just sticking stuff on that I thought looked good. This is very early on. I can't believe I'm telling everyone this. It's embarrassing. Anyway, it must be early in the morning. Maybe I'm dreaming. That's it. I'm asleep. And yeah, and so I literally sent off photocopies and stuffed in an envelope to these companies. I think one wrote back explaining I need an agent. Sort of, you can almost hear them laughing in the letter. And the other one was a letter from Games Workshop. Was it a phone call? I can't remember actually. And they said, yeah, we'll give you a go. We'll give you a go. We'll pay you this per little, just tiny illustrations for the Lost in the Dam book. Right. That was my first work with Games Workshop. Did I just veer from the question? I don't know. But no, anyway, that's
exactly it. Yeah. So Lost in the Dam then. That was you were still doing freelance work, and it was your first sort of job in illustration. Professionally,
my first freelance work was with Games Workshop. My first ever freelance work, yeah.
And that's going into Lost in the Damned. You know, this iconic
straight into Lost in the Damned. Yeah. The first one I did for the Lost in the Damned book was it the Centaurs? I can't remember, but if you were to line them up, you'd see a progression in professionality, shall we say? Yeah, but. That was good, actually. That was a good thing to do before my dad surprised me with the studio job, because that was like intensive training for me. I hadn't done all the art college like all the other artists had done because they wouldn't let me in. So that was my intensive training before I ended up in-house in the studio, which was another level of training. But it was all very good. I mean, people would pay a fortune for the training I've had, you know, just by being plonked next to an artist and stuff like that. Yeah, I'm lucky. I know I'm lucky, but I also did work hard to get it.
So how did you end up becoming in-house then? What was that transition from doing the freelance stuff for Lost in the Dam to being a Games Workshop artist full-time?
Right. There is an amusing anecdote, amusing for me, and I will get it wrong because I'm rubbish at anecdotes. Always have been. That's why I don't talk to people. I was out, I don't know where I was in town, up in the north of England, near Sheffield, staying with my mum and dad because we just left our previous home from down south in England. And my dad was getting frustrated, shall we say, with me, and said, you know, every day, when you getting a job, when you getting a job, when you getting, you know, doing what a father should do. And yeah, that's when I went out one day and came back, and my dad said, "Oh, I've just been speaking to a guy called John Blanche." John Blanche, I know that name. John Blanche, Games Workshop. He goes, "Yeah, you got an interview." I don't know when it was. It might have even been the following day. I can't remember. But he got an interview at Nottingham, and yeah. And I was totally flabbergasted, totally shocked, and thought, "Oh my God, what the hell?" Because at heart, I was still a boy who lived with my mum and dad. And he drove me through to Nottingham the next day, and that was basically he dumped me. Have fun, and yeah. So I went into the building, totally nervous and not knowing what to expect. And they sat me down. John Blanche came in, and I don't know if he planned it. He probably did. But sitting next to me while I was waiting for him to come into this small room was the Jim Burns painting for Space Marine. You know, the tiny, what do I used to call it?
Epic. It became epic, but yeah,
Space Marine. Yeah, but it was his classic Dark Angels, was it, with the green armor?
Right. Yeah, I think I know the
It's
one
got
you
that
mean.
side-on classic face. You can see Tyson's face, Mike Tyson's face in the background as well. But I was sat there looking at that, thinking, "Oh my God, these boys know what they're doing." I'm sure he did it to scare me, because he did it. It worked. It scared me. Oh my God, I'm not that good. What am I doing here? Right, just pretend. Just pretend. And then John came in. Had a little interview. I think he'd made his mind up anyway, but they put me on the lowest wage they could and left me to it. Yeah, that was the interview anyway. And yeah, it was fine. And I don't think I did go home after that, apart from to get my stuff. Yeah.
Right.
Because it was such a relaxed atmosphere, I think someone just went into the office and said, "Oh, has anyone got a spare floor for this thing to sleep on?" And I said, "Well, yeah, okay." No,
I mean, what was that atmosphere like at the time then? What was the studio sort of vibe and the sort of feel of the place at that
it
time?
was great. It was like, I mean, I was a scruffy student. You can imagine, but I haven't changed much. I was a scruffy student with certain sort of attitudes and things. Even I was shocked by going in thinking, "Are these people getting paid? Are they actually working?" Because they were just, just having fun. I mean, even Rick Priestley used to make me laugh all the time. They were just slandering each other across the room and virtually throwing paper at each other. It was ridiculous. But we got loads done. I mean, obviously. And yeah, I was put in that office first, I think, with Rick, Lindsay. There's an Andy guy. Sorry, Andy, I can't remember your name. Nigel Stillman. He was working on writing stuff. I think it was just what we used to call fluff, the background stuff. Sorry, Nigel, if I've got that wrong, but I think that's what it's doing. Yeah, and names. I'm really terrible with names, but I will remember them. Jervis was there. It was actually very busy. Upstairs, where the creators were, the writers and the artists, was quieter. Downstairs was more manic, people in front of screens and stuff. Yeah. So I was in that room. Oh, Bill King was in that room as well for a while. Was he in-house or did he just join us for a few months? I can't remember, but he was there. And straight away I was thrown onto, because I've been doing it freelance anyways, thrown onto Lost in the Damned. And that was obviously great, because they were still writing it when I was working on it. So I go up to Rick and say, "Oh, I've just finished one. You got any ideas? What do you need?" And he'd go, "Oh, page 98 needs this." I'd say, "What's that?" He goes, "Oh, just choose one of these spells or something and, pull your boots." And that was the sort of attitude. If we knew that the other person was good at what they did, you're not going to tell them what to do. You're paying them because they're good in the first place. So you say, "Right, go away, do stuff for that." And that was your brief, pretty much. That's why it worked, and that's why it was good, because they treated the artists like human adults and the writers like human adults, and it was good. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, that sounds like an interesting collaborative space then as well. Was there any sort of feedback from things that you would be creating that would then find its way into the text as well?
Oh, sure, we bounced stuff all the time. Yeah. I'd hear Rick say something that would make me laugh. I think, "Well, I quite like that idea." And go and do it maybe, and vice versa. I'd do some artwork, or another artist do some artwork, and they'd write around that. Actually, that was a lot of the time. That's how it worked. Miniatures and writing came after the artwork. Obviously, you'd expect an artist to want to say that, but it was true. And it still is, pretty much. If the company's any good and they've hired an artist, then they've hired that artist because they like what they do. If you're going to start telling that artist exactly what to do, then why have you hired them? That's my thinking anyway. And that was their attitude at the time. It was very good, very laid back and chaotic, literally chaotic. It was lots of people having a laugh and enjoying the wave that was starting to build for the company. And it was good. But they soon got fed up with me and moved me in with the grown-up artists and sat me down between, who was in there when I first joined? Paul Bonner. He'd come in-house a little bit before me. Steve Tappin a little bit before me. Don't hear much about Steve Tappin. He was a big influence on me. He was one of the few proper artists in there. You know, who could do all the different painting, try different stuff. Like me and Paul Bond, who just stuck to the same rigid thing. Who else? Tony Ackland, of course. It was Tony who was friends with me, really. He made me feel comfortable. He took me under his wing, sort of thing. And he was great. Tony was great. We just sit in the corner bitching everyone, you know. It was good. In a nice way. And Dave Gallagher, he moved in eventually. He used to have his own room upstairs, but he moved down. And in that room, lots of throwing paper at each other. If you left your drawing alone for too long, you come back and find something drawn on it. Usually not very nice. Usual childish stuff. We were just having fun and really getting into it. But for me, who hadn't had any training or anything, it was like gold dust. It was like I was watching Paul Bonnet work. I was watching all these different artists work, different ways of working, different techniques. Yeah, it was very good for me personally. Yeah.
Did you find yourself absorbing like those different, like new styles,
yes,
new techniques and stuff?
And we had Kev Adams in his little room, his little goblin room next to us. He was another really good friend who looked out for me. I was often in there drinking his coffee. Yeah, it was good. Yeah, it was good.
Yeah. I mean, I was reading Plague Demon recently, one of the GW books, that original run that came out in 1990, and that had.
I saw the artwork for that the other day. Just it was in my drawer. Yeah.
Well, I mean, fantastic stuff in there, and that had reused a load of your Nurglings from The Lost and the Damned as the sort of chapter headers. So each chapter would start with just a Nurgling that was kind of chilling out or having a lovely time.
That's right. Yeah. Nurgle was a big thing for me. It was always my favourite. I don't know why. I think because it combined the horror so well with the sci-fi. It was good British stuff, you know. Yeah. Sorry, carry on. Yes, well, that was one of the first novels. Yeah, with the black. Yeah. I did a few novels. I can't remember all the names, but I did a few. Mark Gascoigne, that's right.
Yeah, because there's a lot of the iconography. I mean, similar to Lost and the Damned as well, where there might be symbols and runes and banners and that kind of stuff that was kind of spot illustrations that gave the feel of the world without like too much sort of detail of the world, if that makes sense. It is exactly sort of what it felt like.
Yeah, you gave a feel of the world without dictating.
Sure.
You had the freedom to use it or be inspired by it. It wasn't like, that's your symbol, go and use it. You know, it was nice. Yeah, that's another reason I like the chaos stuff, because there's always a bit of leeway either side.
Sure. Yeah. And I think one thing that's always that I've been curious about was the obviously there's a real relationship between Warhammer Fantasy and 40k, and especially in those books, the Realm of Chaos books that straddle both worlds. Did you find there was any kind of difference in how you would approach creating art for those worlds, or was it very much like they are like siblings, they're quite closely related, so the art is similar?
A lot, you know. We weren't there thinking, what do they want? We were there thinking, oh, what do I want to do?
Right.
So it all depended on your personal tastes, I suppose. Mine at the time was, I didn't see any difference between the two. It wasn't like future and past. It was like a sort of not virtual, alternative reality type thing, as far as I was concerned, without using those words at the time. But it was like, different planes are the same thing. So it's different variations of the same thing. In one that had guns. But also, what intrigued me with Rick's original ideas was the combining the two as well. The fantasy, and then someone turning up with a bolter and stuff like that. It was craziness. I loved it. But as far as artistically, no, not really. No, I treated them... It's really difficult for me to pinpoint why I do stuff in a certain way. It usually just comes down to what I think looks good at the time. the rule of cool, basically. Obviously, you've got your influences at the time. One of my major influences around that time was Excalibur, John Borman's Excalibur. Still one of the best films ever made. That and Conan the Barbarian, of course. Definitely one of the best films ever made. So it was all very grungy, and I was into my metal, so it was always had that feel. And I like to think a lot of it was quite personal. It wasn't sort of derived or contrived anywhere else. It was quite sort of innocent where it came from, if you know what I mean. Yeah. And the reason, and it still is, most of the artwork in those early books is still some of the best they've done. The reason for that is because the artists were enjoying themselves. And I'm not bitching there. I'm just answering your question. I'm not being a bitch. I am a bitch, especially about that company. I mean, I can be. They were brilliant, but they weren't always brilliant. Yeah. I might get into trouble with this. If I do, I'll be suing you, okay? I won't be in trouble. They don't listen to me anyway. They used to might. I think I moaned from day one anyway. They're used to it. It's fine. But, yeah, as far as stylistically, no. I mean, I wasn't even clever enough to have artists that I'd think of using as my muse or whatever. I mean, I didn't think like that. My main inspirations were the artists sitting around me. I mean, we'd feed off each other and encourage each other. Yeah, it's. I think we all had that sort of slightly different take on what we thought chaos should look like and things like that. And a lot of the stuff was still being nailed down at the time, so we were fortunate in that respect. We were the nailers, if you like. We were the people going, well, you know, that's going in that direction. That's without being too sort of, like I said, it's that badge only, and yeah.
Yeah. I mean, did you find then over that time, as things did start to get nailed down, and because obviously the games themselves were changing a bit because they were becoming more formalized and consistent and sort of coherent, I suppose. So the chaos of those early versions of the games was kind of being refined and polished and cleaned up a little bit. But at the same time, it felt like, or it seems like, Games Workshop itself was doing the same thing. It was so that process was happening for the company. So was there a sort of changing culture, a sort of changing feel to the place over time?
Yeah, that's why my first stint in the studio was barely a year. I was there. Right. All that work you see was crammed in. It was barely a year, and yes, but it's not just Games Workshop. I'm an old timer. I've worked with a few companies. I mean, young companies, and I've seen how it happens. And it's it's a normal, natural thing. They were doing all this stuff, and then a lot of this is guesswork. I don't know, and it's factual. They were doing all this stuff, and then I presume that their fans were growing, and they were getting more popular, and well, they were getting more popular because the game stage were getting bigger each time. And even though I was only there for a year, I'd still go down to the game stage sort of now and then if they invited me. But yeah, I suppose it's just they were, oh, we're doing well, we're getting money. Oh, why is that? Oh, that's nice of them. Let's try and please them more, which is a mistake as far as I'm concerned. You shouldn't be going out of your way to please your crowd. Your crowd should be a natural thing. You should attract the people that like that stuff. You shouldn't be trying to persuade people into like that stuff. Not what you're there for, really. I'm gibbering again. Yeah. Does that answer your question? Sorry.
It does. Yeah. I mean, because you were there for a year in that first instance, and then so where did your career take you? Because then you did come back to Games
before that year. Before that year was about 4 or 5 months of freelance.
Right.
So you can call it a year and a half, really. It was quite intensive.
Sure.
It was pretty intensive. What was the rest of your question? Sorry.
Well, where did you go then following Games Workshop before you came back later on? So what was the sort of the trajectory from there?
Another reason artists started leaving, my group of artists started leaving Games Workshop was because the physical move of the building as well. We didn't like the new building. It was very sort of new and just wasn't inspiring. The original building was right in the heart of Nottingham, in an old building. You could see all the history around you, and you're right next to town. And it was just more fun, more human, you know. So that was one aspect of why certain creatives got a bit fed up of it, as well as them starting to lay off a few people during the move and things like that. All the mess you get with that sort of thing, it's never anything personal, it's just messy and a bit impersonal. Yeah, and it all just started it's not as good as it used to be, and boo-hoo, poor us, and then we all started going our own way. The others seemed to cope fine. Me, I found it difficult getting work and stuff for quite a while after that, mostly because I was traveling around at the time. I think I took time off, I went traveling with friends and stuff, and just reverted to my sort of messy sort of student attitude. You get the picture. Messiness. And then did I contact them or they contact me? I can't remember. But a small company in Scotland called Fantasy Forge, tiny company. They used to do mostly resin stuff for collectors and people who do the dungeon crawling and stuff like that. Like you get resin statues, very basic stuff, very small company. But they, I'm sorry, I just kicked my chihuahua. They started doing their game Cryomech and stuff like that. So I think they asked me up because I didn't know about the game. Or maybe it was Dave Perry who told me about it. I can't remember. Someone told me something happened, and I moved up to Scotland to work for this company, tiny company. And we started working on a game called Cryomech. And if you're lucky enough to get that book, you'll see that the first drawings were just like the big drawings I was doing for Games Workshop. I hadn't changed my style or anything like that. But then I did start to change my style with them because, again, it's a different environment. I was the only artist there, and I thought, right, they need me more than I need them. I'm just going to start being a bit more creative, bit practice, try something new, try that. So it was good. It was bad pay, stuck in the middle of Scotland, not knowing anyone, after a 9-hour coach journey. It was fine. It was good. It was fine. Someone was paying me to draw, so I couldn't really complain. And I'm sorry, I keep forgetting what the question is. And
no, that's fine. I mean, because what happened then following that? Then, so did you stay with them for a while, or look at other stuff? Where did you sort of progress from that Cryomech work?
We were chatting about Target Games earlier.
Sure,
it's the same people.
Right,
it's the same people. Target Games. The stuff we did with them was a Swedish company who we sort of teamed up with. I say we, this guy called John Robertson, who was a friend and my boss. He started Fantasy Forge. After Fantasy Forge, I think we did another company, rebranded or something. I didn't get anywhere. And then it was Target Games. And we did Chronopia and all that stuff.
Right.
That's pretty much the transition from the first year at Games Workshop. Went off on my own, got messy, moved up north, got a small job, Chronopia. Yeah.
I mean, we mentioned Chronopia when we first spoke, and I because I'm a big fan of Chronopia. It's sort of lost fantasy war game. It's had a little revival, and sort of there's been subsequent stuff, but that at the time was this brand new thing, and it felt very different to Warhammer. It was a sort of dark fantasy world. It was bringing in lots of there were barbarians, and there were the sort of like every elf was a dark elf, and there was kind of a real darkness to that. And there's the devout, which was kind of chaos sort of feeling, sort of army, noble humans, and all that sort of stuff. But that was it seems like a very big project, because that core book that was released to support that game was pretty much all just your art, you were doing loads of pieces in that. Is that right?
Yeah, 4 books. You mean the army books? There was more than 4.
Sorry, just in
The
the
rule books,
original,
the
the
base
original
books.
core, the starting book was, and then
The
there were
original
subsequent
book,
army books. You're
yeah, the
right.
original book. I don't think I had anything in. It was mostly Paolo and Italian
Right.
artists, and then it became all sort of UKified, and I moved in. There was another artist. Who was it? I'll remember soon. Yeah. Yeah, that was great, and it was that was like something I've always enjoyed doing, was world building. But I mean, it was great. We had some great ideas, but we were limited with having no money and a really tiny crew. So I shouldered all the artwork, which is my reason and excuse for a lot of it not being top notch, but still okay. And I also hadn't really painted before that, especially in color. So I just, as I do sometimes, I just think, right, and I just jump into something, and it usually starts off looking really bad, but then it becomes okay. Yeah. So it was, yeah, it was a big step, a new step, but it was good. It was a good project. We did a lot, and I mean, I think that was barely a year as well. But when I look back at what I did, I don't understand how I managed to do so much work. By the way, people ask me, and I look at my plan chest full of drawers, and I think, when did I do that? All right, I'll open a portfolio and think, who did? Oh, I did that. It's ridiculous. Yeah, it's ridiculous. I don't know how I do it or why I do it.
Well, yeah, because it did seem like a huge amount of work. I mean, as you mentioned, there were these sort of narrative faction books that would move things forward, introduce new factions, and sort of it did seem like there were quite a few of those in relatively quick succession, and they were stuffed full of art. There were loads of pieces in there.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. I took it on myself to rather than just do a concept, single characters, use illustration as a way for the sculptors who were in the same room at the time. So it'd be literally me passing drawings over to the sculptor and stuff, which was great. It worked. Yeah, yeah. Who was it? There was a guy, one of the sculptors used to work for Games Workshop, actually, Roy Eastland. I don't know if you're familiar. He worked there for a very short time at Games Workshop. Yeah. Sorry.
No, it's interesting stuff. I mean, you mentioned there that you sort of were trying some new techniques as well. So was that like an important step in sort of developing into the techniques and the style you would take back to Games Workshop?
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Yes. Because previous to that, at Games Workshop, I looked at brushes like they were aliens, you know. I did. No, I'm a pencil man. That's all I'll ever do. That's me, you know. But then I moved and grew up a bit. I thought, right, sod it. Let's go. And that's how I train myself, you know. I train myself by doing it. Yeah, I learn by doing. Yeah.
Because when did you then come back to Games Workshop?
Oh, this is where my memory gets very messy, and dates and stuff will be wrong, but I won't say any dates. It was a desperate year. So desperate, I was actually doing Magic cards, which I hate doing.
Right.
Nothing against Magic. They're great. Very good players, very nice people. Great. It's just I can never do other people's ideas. I've never been a fan doing other people's ideas. I know, it's terrible. Very snobby of me and very, yeah. I am really up my own. But, you know, it's fine. It's fine. Like it or not. That's how it is. And, yeah, it was a rough time. And so I think I got in touch. Dave Perry, an ex-Games Workshop miniature painter. He came up and he started work with Target Games. I can't remember in what capacity. It might be in figure painting. And he suggested, you know, I know Jez Goodwin. John, why don't you go and get... Because the company was folding by then, by the way. I wasn't jumping ship or anything like that. Target Games was going. And he suggested... go getting some freelance work or something for Games Workshop, and he was friends with Jez and stuff like that. Obviously, I was friendly with Jez, but I hadn't kept in touch with him. And so I got some freelance work again, and then they offered me some in-house work, and we just moved house. And I got a mortgage. That's right. Just before Target collapsed, I just got a mortgage. And so when that happened, it was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? Panicking. Ended up approaching Games Workshop, swallowing my pride, approaching Games Workshop and getting some freelance. And then eventually going down for, was it half a year? I can't remember how long I was down there for. Doing some more in-house work. And that was around the time of, shortly after Carl Kopinski joined the studio. They're all new faces apart from Dave Gallagher. Alex Boyd, Carl Kopinski, Paul Denton joined after me. Yeah, and that's pretty much how that happened. And that would have been around the time of Inquisitor and stuff like that.
Right. Was it a different vibe then, with all of those new faces and a sort of changed company, or did it feel the same coming back?
They were good boys. The Paul Bonner and that lot, they might seem like good boys, but they're not good boys. They were naughty boys. So it's a different kind of fun. But when I turned up, Carl made me very welcome. He made me laugh and stuff. We got on really well. We're really good friends now. And we still stay in touch. And his brother joined as well, Stefan. It was good. It was a completely different vibe, though. It was a big open plan office with just the boards, between you, which I kept forgetting about and always embarrassing myself. No, I'm not going there. And it was a different vibe. It was still a good vibe. They were just a bit more professional than what I was used to. Professional in the sense that they sat on their asses and, stayed at a desk and did their work.
Right.
But obviously, after a while, once I turned up, that all changed a bit and it got messy again, so it was fine.
I mean, you again. Sorry.
It was good times.
You seem to take on a lot of work in that sort of time when you came back, though, as well, because you're the sort of proliferation of the sort of Adrian Smith version of the Warhammer world, for instance. You were doing box art, lots of different boxes. Almost felt like a whole range almost that was kind of following your new style.
I was pigeonholed a little bit, maybe. If it was chaos, then I'd be one of the first people they'd approach.
Right.
Which was fine by me, usually. If it was orcs, you know where they went with that. Etc. Sorry, what was your question again?
Well, I suppose it's just how because you've obviously sort of developed your style and kind of taken on a sort of new kind of approach, and then that seemed to then turn up quite a lot. There were loads of different pieces that you were doing across Games Workshop releases during that time.
All the time I'm doing this, I do think there's something wrong with me. I know it's not a PC thing to say, but I think there is something different about me, shall we say.
Right.
Everyone around me says, no. But I think there might be. I'm definitely OCD. And with what I laughingly call work, painting and drawing, I've never really stopped. And I don't think I could. I mean, people are surprised when they see how much work I've done for a company, but that's only what I did for them at the time. When I went home, I didn't stop. I was doing stuff for myself. I mean, I've got a lot of stuff I've just done that no one's seen and probably never will see, because I just can't stop. Because even when I'm doing a painting, it can be, it could even be one of my better ones, a good one. All I'm thinking about is the next one. As soon as I start a painting, I'm thinking about next. Yeah, it's it's a drive, a useful drive, but it can be a bit exhausting, but mentally exhausting. but because I sincerely want to do it, I just keep doing it. It's a real. If I do have a muse, it's got a whip and a shotgun at my back. You know what I mean? Yeah.
I mean, that's fascinating though. Are these like, do ideas are they constantly sort of bubbling up, and then you sort of need to express it, and you need to get it on paper, or sort of what?
Yeah.
How does that drive manifest for you?
Because I'll get an idea when I'm doing something, either an improvement or a sort of carry on from it, a progression from it, and then that's it. That's all I'm thinking about. And then once that happens, I just think, right, okay, let's get this one finished. We'll treat this one like a practice for the next one. And that's how I got through Chronopia. Because I do one, oh, that's awful. Next one will be better. Next one will be better. I would teach myself. And when you teach yourself something and you see progression, that's all you need to keep going. And if that doesn't keep you going, then maybe you should try something else. But yeah, self-drive is very important. If you don't have that, then it can be difficult. Obviously, I've taken it to the extreme where it's my whole life. I don't socialize or anything like that. I'm a bad husband, bad father, bad Chihuahua owner, according to my Chihuahua. But I pay the bills, you know.
So, I mean, one of the things that I was looking through the art book that Black Library released of your art sort of during that later period, and there's obviously you returned to a few subjects, but one in particular was you'd done a Horus and the Emperor in Lost and the Damned, and then you returned to do that later on. I mean, could you talk a little bit about what that was like at those two different instances and tackling it in the same moment, but in very different ways at very different times in your career?
The Emperor versus Horus was one of the very first ones I did when I moved in-house.
Right.
One of the very first ones. Because I was sat in the office with the writers, Nigel, Rick, and big Scottish guy. He wrote the fluff for the Horus. Oh, goodness. Bill King. God, what am I like? My brain. I'm old. It's dusty. Forgive me. Bill, I'm sorry. Yeah, Bill King. I think he was in the process of writing the background story for that. When the Emperor meets Horus. And I could tell that everyone was quite interested, and I thought, right, I want a piece of that. So I went over and I said to Rick, right, I'm going to do that. And then went away and started it. So, because it was very early on at that time, I was still a very young artist. I didn't have many skills. I was still learning and teaching myself. And so I wasn't very good at portraits and stuff like that. So we got a Polaroid, and I took some Polaroids of Bill King's face and used him as Horus with the underlighting and stuff like that. Obviously, it's very loosely based. I wasn't very good at copying portraits and stuff, but it turned out okay. And the Emperor was sort of loosely based on myself. That's a very young man with dyed black hair at the time, and just, yeah. But that's why he's looking away, you see. You don't really see his face, you just see. Also, another reason I did that is because I'm always wary about nailing down a character too early. So if you keep some things a little bit sort of vague, you can adjust and add later on easily enough. So that's one of the reasons that, as my coffee arriving, one of the reasons I did it that one. Cheers, darling. Lifeblood. Yeah. And obviously I was working very close with John, more so in the second edition. John sort of had more to say, shall we say. Not verbally, but by then he'd done a lot of concept work himself for that period. That's when he was starting to do the big Golden Astartes and stuff, and the big Peter, and he'd come up and he'd give me these, and you know his style is very crazy, and sometimes it's very difficult to see what you're doing. You need to find which suited me actually, because then as an artist, you're not getting influenced by the skills of the person, you're getting influenced by the messages they're giving you in that. You're getting the Ian Banks had a word for it, fragra. The writer Ian Banks, fragra, it's like the essence of stuff.
Right.
So that was good. So yeah, the first one was pencil, Bill King. Jumped on it because they were writing it at the time. That's just what I knew. I could feel the history being made in the air, so I just jumped in, grabbed it. I was like that a lot with that book, because I loved that book. I loved the way it was coming together, and just everything about that book was just mental. I mean, I remember those Rick working on the charts when you're rolling the dice charts for the mutations and stuff, and we'd have our own little sort of campaigns going in the office, which I soon gave up on because I got fed up of sawing arms off and sticking and taking it off again and sticking it up. Of course, I think my character ended up, was it moronic or something in the first I forget it. Anyway, yeah, I digress. Yeah, so the second Horus one was like, yeah, wasn't freelance. What did I do that freelance? It was between the first stint at the workshop and the second. Yeah, I didn't paint it in the studio. I think I painted that at home, so that might have been freelance even.
Right.
But I was talking to John a lot about it. He was sending me color copies of his concepts, and he wasn't like, do it like this, do it like this. He just said, I've done this. Take what you want. And, yeah. But it's in my nature not to take someone else's idea and completely change it. So, I was honest with his stuff. There's a lot of his input in there, especially with the background figures, the first ever Space Marines, whatever they were supposed to be, custodies.
Right.
Yeah, and that was painted color and acrylic. So it was like from my early first days pencil up to painting full color acrylic. And the difference between it was what John made me put a weapon in his hand rather than having the two lightning claws.
Right.
And I said at the time, that's going to cause trouble. They're not going to like that. And they didn't like that. But still, it looked all right. Sorry, John, I had to say that. He said.
So when you were working then in that sort of second stint, you were doing lots of color pieces. You were doing book and product covers. You also did some comic strips for Inferno and stuff like that as well. I mean, were there sort of, they all feel like quite different projects and approaches. So were you just getting to try your hand at lots of different stuff, or was your style still developing in new ways during that era?
Do you think my style varied from project to project? I'm not sure I did. See, I'm never quite sure what people mean by style.
Sure.
You mean technique or?
Yeah, I guess. And I'm certainly no expert in the language of it, but yeah, I guess because you look at the sort of, so if you take, say, the Night Goblins unit box, that sort of color piece, iconic image, there seems like a sort of real depth of field and lots of subjects in there, and then compare that to, say, a strip like the Warhammer strip about the Skaven and the dwarves and the actual Galmaraz. That obviously is a very different style because it's a comic book strip and it has a sort of different feel, I suppose. So were you learning new lessons, I suppose, would be the real question, whilst you were back at workshop, or were you sort of just consolidating everything you'd learned up to that point?
Yeah, it was probably more consolidating rather than anything. Yeah, I'd done a lot of stuff in the gap between my two stints against workshop with other companies, so I'm learning all the time. I'm still learning. I don't think I've started yet. No, I'm being serious when I say that. Yeah, I don't say to myself, no, I've not started yet. No, yeah, just watch. God, I keep throwing myself off track with my gibberish. No, No, I was learning all the time. I'm learning all the time. That was my first comic strip, actually. I think that's the first one I've done. Done quite a few since then. But yeah, after that, I did one with Carl Kapinski. Have you seen that one where he did the drawing and I did the painting?
Or
yeah, he did the story with dwarves coming down mountain passes and stuff. He did the drawing and I painted over the top. We did a little collab.
I'm not sure I have seen that one. No.
Yeah. I've got one of the pages here, and he's got one as well.
Right.
Yeah. God, I just throw myself off again. I'm always doing that. Yeah. So no, not really. I'm learning all the time, and now that I'm sort of confident in my abilities and I know my strengths and stuff, being older basically, and this is to the young artists out there, that eventually you get to a stage where you're old enough and you're confident enough in your own skills where you are looking for jobs that entail something different, so you can push your boundaries a bit further in that direction. So it's all essential, and it's up to the artist to make what they can of it. And each bit of work is a learning process, so you'd expect it to be different like 6 months later, your style. And it certainly was with me, I think. Yeah.
Do you have any sort of favorite pieces from either period when you were working at Games Workshop that you sort of look back on and say, you know what, that was a really good one. I'm pleased with that. Even looking back now, I sort of, you're not finding faults, you're finding things to celebrate.
Should have got the book out. Favorite? Nah. As I said, my favorite's the next one I'm doing. That's my favorite. No. No. I think I love that whole book, and not just because of my style. I mean, all the artwork in it is just fantastic, and it's just a lovely, solid book. Favorite,
or even that you're just proud of, or that you look back and say, you know what, that's a good piece of work.
Yeah. There was the first time when I was a young spotty dude in the studio surrounded by proper artists, the first one to get a reaction from another artist, and it was Tony, God bless him. He came over and said, "Oh, that's really good, that," and I've never forgotten. That's what it did to me, you see. Things like that, little things, little brainworms. And that gave me a boost. It made me think, oh, I'm doing something right here, so let's carry on. A little bit of confidence. There isn't a title for it, though, but it's a Tzeentch magician on a horse. He's in the middle of a big battlefield. You can't see the ground for the crowd. It's a rearing horse. He's got the thing, and he's got staff, and he's making one of the guys mutate in front of him. You don't remember?
I don't know off the top of my head, no, but I'm going to be searching for this.
Yeah, a lot of people don't really talk about it. That's one of my favourites. That's on my mum's wall right now, next to the pottery owl. And there's a few others. Another crazy thing is when I look at the amount of work there is, some of those drawings took like weeks to finish. Some of the big ones, especially the big battle scenes and stuff. Horus, the Horus Emperor one took about 3 weeks. To do that. I mean, yeah, it's not light work. But there are I've got a few favourites in that book, and that was the only book I was really working on that when I first started. I suppose a lot of my favourites in that book are other artists' work, not my own, but. Horus one, I was happy with that. The battle one with the Tzeentch guy on the horse. There's another one which I don't know where it's gone. I think it disappeared. Probably on some manager's wall somewhere. But it's a sort of Escher type staircase job going on in the background, and there's 2 champions fighting each other in midair, sort of thing. And one of the champions is actually the character from the picture I was just talking about, the big battlefield one. So that was one of my first times I had carried a character into another scene. So I must have been enjoying it. Yeah.
So you eventually left Games Workshop again and sort of explored other stuff, and then you've sort of built quite it seems like a good working relationship, strong collaboration with CMON, and sort of worked on a number of their products over the years. One of my particular favorites is the Rising Sun game that you did a lot of really nice pieces for, and I suppose I'm curious about what that working relationship is like and how that sort of, are you coming up with new concepts and sort of saying, here's a load of really cool ideas, and then a game is created from it? Or is it, and again, a lot of briefs and it's like, we need a monster that looks like this, or we need something that looks like that?
David Preety approached me. He's one of the big boys at CMON. And he's the same age as me, but he was a fan of my work when I was like 18, working at 18, 19. He was a big Games Workshop fan, a big fan of mine, and Paul Bonner's and stuff. We're all friends. And he got in touch one day and he said, "Oh, I work for a board games company. Would you be interested in board games?" I was thinking Monopoly and all that stuff. And thinking, no, not really. I need control. I don't want to be a bit. I need to be a big bit. Yeah, I know. What pretentious so-and-so. But I am. That's what it is. He got in touch and he persuaded me basically, just by being nice. And I thought I'll give it a go. And no, he was great because he just come along and say, right, we're going to be doing a board game based on Japanese mythology or Far Eastern mythology, not just Japanese, Korean and sorts. You want to do it? I said, yeah, as long as there's not a specific brief, I'll do it. I'll do it. He goes, oh no, not brief. You just start. So I just started churning them out, what I thought would be nice, and they wrote around it. And it's been the same with each game since then. The art leads everything else, which when you're working on a product that is fundamentally a visual thing, a board game or a game is pretty visual. You need to get the visuals right. That's what you draw the people in with, and then they sit down, look at the rules, and then anyway, maybe I'm wrong, but that's how I see it. So he was great. He's fantastic. I'm still working for him. I'm lead artist with him. I'm basically part of the company, although they let me work with other companies as long as they're not doing board games. So they're really cool, really cool. I'm so lucky to meet that guy. Pays me well. It gives me lots of work. He knows I'm a workaholic, so he can just keep shoving it at me. And I love it. I love it. Yeah.
And they recently did an adaptation of your Chronicles of Hate graphic novel, right? Yeah, this hate game, which I think was a Kickstarter last year. I mean, that again is an entire world that you've created. And so what was your sort of the inspiration for that world and the
inspiration was always there. That's just pure sort of heavy metal cannibals with big axes, yeah, that's what I like. That's like the John Borman, Excalibur and Conan all joined together. It's all mine. I didn't try to be clever and do anything different because you'll always go wrong doing that. So I just chose some tropes that we like and some ideas that I like and just shoved them all in. But it really started with a drawing of the main character in the story, this little mutated thing, three-legged thing. And I just had it sitting in front of me for ages until someone looked at it. The story would be going, I think, I'm going to do a comic. I want to put this guy through hell and make people laugh and cry at the end, hopefully. But I'm no story writer, so I thought, how do you write a comic? So I thought, right, let me think of the classics. The Hobbit, what's that? That's literally A to B. I mean, even Tolkien even called it A to B. No, but there and back again. Apologies, there and back again. So I thought, right, we'll do that, except this one doesn't come back again. And when I was doing Hate, I was obviously working, and that was my own time. So that'd be from midnight till 4 in the morning. I'd be doing a page basically in the first book, very fast, very sort of, just going with the flow and being creative and being a bit arty, being a bit experimental, because it wasn't for anyone. I felt comfortable doing that. And it just started growing. The story started growing. I thought, oh, this is good. And then the story sort of fed itself, told itself, and it was literally sort of rolling along. So I just kept doing that. And now I started that about 11 years ago. So, and even, don't get into comics if you want money, because I haven't earned any money from that comic. A few quid from the game, thanks to CMON, but that's it. But as far as comics go, you got to do it because you love it. And if you're lucky, you'll make some money from it. But yeah, that's how it started. The comic to that. And then I started going to David. Oh, David, what about a hate board game? Wouldn't that be nice? David. Until he buckled and said, yeah. So I did a very limited edition. But it turned out to be a massive game. The box, like a coffin. It's got over 80 figures in it, and it's really freaking beautiful. So I was very proud of that. And yeah. But I've got another comic, another world on the way as we're speaking. I've got it in front of me here. So I don't stop, and there'll be more hate as well coming. I'm actually making a movie based on my hate comic.
Wow.
Zero budget at the moment. I say zero budget. I'm spending money on it. No one else is. We've got an old leaky church down the road, which I've got a lease on. So we've got big blue screens, stuff like that. And me and a friend have been making props, armor and stuff like that. And it's looking pretty good, actually.
Yeah.
And we've got a couple of good cinematographers who were local anyway, and they'd already made a film around here called Dick Dynamite, which is actually quite famous, getting more famous each time. Keep an eye out for it. Dick Dynamite, Scottish film. Yeah. So yeah, hate is still going, still growing. The film is interesting, and I've got more comics coming. And with CMON, I'm usually working on at least 2 games simultaneously.
Right.
It takes me a couple of years per game, and then another year before it comes out. So yeah, there's a few things already still waiting, queued up to come out, and yeah, it's all good. It's all good, and I'm already thinking about the next one. So.
That's great. That sounds like loads of super exciting stuff on the way, and I'm not surprised you're up until 4, because that sounds like so many projects to be working on.
No, yeah, all the time, yeah.
And you've got a YouTube channel as well, of course, where you're sort of sharing some of your process and some of the work.
Yes, thank you for bringing it up. Yes, thank you. Yeah, I do. It's something we're starting to take more seriously. Try and be what it's like. It's very difficult. You say, "Oh, I'll see you next week," and then life gets in the way, and you can't see them next week. But we're getting on top of that, and yeah, one of them actually did really well. One of the videos did really well. I think it's one of the first fan arts I did. Fan art of my own work, because I don't want to get in trouble with Games Workshop, so I just do my own stuff and call it fan art. I'm sure that's quite obvious to everyone, but I had to say it. Yeah, that's going well. Yeah, thanks for asking. That's going well. Yeah, we should do a little swappy thing. I'll put your link on mine and vice versa.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'll include a link to some of those fan art ones and some of your other pieces as well, because I think there's so much fantastic stuff there. But yeah,
that'd be great.
I really appreciate you finding the time, Adrian, to chat with me and sort of share some of your memories from an amazing career. So thank you very much.
No, it's been good. I was very happy to be asked, because I'd seen some of your stuff before you got in contact with me. And I found it entertaining. I was learning stuff I didn't even know about when I was there. So it was all a bit of a haze, though. But yeah.
Great stuff. Thank you. Massive thank yous to Adrian for joining me to talk about the history and the process and the future of his art. It was absolutely awesome. Some tremendous insights and just a really fun conversation. So massive thank you. If you want to support me, then you can check out my Patreon via the link in the description below. I have also released my interviews as a podcast. So if you go to your favorite podcast catcher, then search In Conversation with Jordan Sorcery, you should be able to find it there. Not every episode is available yet. It's taking me some time to work through them, but I'm going to be putting pretty much all of my interviews with famous Games Workshop and industry insiders up on those podcast feeds. If you want to support me even more, I would love it if you could share and like this video and my others and subscribe to the channel. Everything really does help. Leave a review on the podcast. All of that kind of stuff is massively important. So I really, really appreciate it. You will always find the latest interviews here on the channel first, but the podcast is going to have all of my interviews eventually. Thank you very much once again to Adrian. Thank you for watching. I'm Jordan, and this is Jordan Sorcery.